师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。We will also recite a short verse of a Bodhisattva aspiration. Okay, maybe we recite together. You can see. I would like to obtain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and for that aim, I will listen to the teachings and join this class. Okay, selamat petang. So, this being the first lesson of this series, I'd like to provide a framework of the class. So we have done the recitation of the Buddha's name and also the Bodhisattva aspiration. I will do about an hour of teaching, and then we can have another hour of a small group discussion. So we use this framework because in traditional Buddhist teaching, we talk about developing three kinds of wisdom. You know, there is one temple in Penang called the Triple Wisdom. You know what's the meaning of Triple Wisdom? San Hui. What are the three wisdoms? Let's give you a test. Okay, in broader context, it is a wisdom through hearing or through learning. So this is the first part. The first part of our lesson. And then the second type of wisdom is wisdom by contemplation. And the third type of wisdom is wisdom by practice. So in Chinese it's called Wen Hui, wisdom by hearing, and then Si Hui, wisdom by contemplation, and then finally wisdom by practice. So Wen Si Xiu, so it's learning or listening, contemplation, and practice. So at the end of the session, we will do the transference of merit, and the content of the transference of merit will be in the Pureland tradition, but we will do it in English. So in this series, I will introduce the three important sutras or texts which the Chinese Pureland Buddhism is based on. Buddhism, as we know, originated from India, and then at the time of Emperor Asoka, he sent messenger monks in all directions and spread the teachings of the Buddha beyond India. So to the south, to the island of Sri Lanka, or what used to be called Ceylon, and to the land of gold, Myanmar for sure, or Burma, but that term Suvarna Bhumi, the land of gold, actually refers to Southeast Asia, the whole of Southeast Asia. And then also from India to what we now call Central Asia, and from Central Asia to Europe, and also from Central Asia to China. In fact, many of us who had been to India, especially visiting the pilgrimage sites such as Bodh Gaya, the deer park in Benares or Varanasi, and also in Kusinagar, where the Buddha passed away or attained parinirvana. Those sites, plus others that are quite close to them, plus Lumbini, plus Nalanda, Rajgir, Patna, and so on. So we may imagine that Buddhism started there, and that it was from these places that Buddhism was spread to China, and subsequently also to Tibet and Mongolia. But in fact, Buddhism, the Chinese Buddhist tradition, actually originated from what is now called Central Asia. These include countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many other countries ending with Tan. So you may know that there is a very huge and famous Buddha images that were destroyed at Bamiyan in Afghanistan. So these places used to be very strong in Buddhism. In fact, there was a king, Kanishka, whose contribution to the spread of Buddhism was no less important than Asoka, who supported the Buddha Sasana, the spreading of the Buddha's teaching. So there was a very important Buddhist civilization, a kingdom there. In fact, many schools of Buddhism that flourished after the split of the original United Sangha, about 100 years after the Buddha's parinirvana. The Sangha split into two. The more conservative Sthaviravada and more liberal group call themselves the Mahasangika. Apparently the bigger group. So from these two main branches, in the course of the next 500 years, the Sangha essentially further divided or subdivided into 10 sub-branches, if you like. And from one of the sub-branches, during the time of Emperor Asoka, this tradition was brought to Sri Lanka. And at Sri Lanka itself, it became known as the Theravada school. Theravada is a Pali term. So Pali is not a language. Pali is a dialect spoken by the people who live in an area where Asoka is a capital. What in modern day is called Patna. In ancient time called Pataliputta or Pataliputra. So this was the dialect. In fact, there is no written language called Pali. It is a dialect spoken by the people, and from this area, Buddhism was brought into Sri Lanka. This is one of the branches, one of the sub-branches of the Sthaviravada. Sthaviravada means the school of the elders. Sthavira is the elders. So it became Theravada. In Pali, it's the same meaning. So this became a main tradition of Buddhism today. Then there are two other important traditions. The Chinese Buddhist tradition, which originated from Central Asia, it originated from one of the schools that also belong to a sub-branch of the Sthaviravada. In fact, there are several important branches, sub-branches. One of them is called Sarvastivada, the school that teaches that all exists, that all Dharma exists. This is the literal meaning of it. And then there is also a school which is quite close to what became Theravada in Sri Lanka, called Dhammagupta. So, for example, Chinese Buddhist monks and nuns observe the Vinaya of this Dhammagupta school. So, the Dhammagupta and what became the Theravada, they originated from a common sub-branch. That is the reason the Vinaya of these two schools are almost identical, more than 90% identical. So don't get the wrong idea that there is a Mahayana or Chinese Vinaya. There is no such thing as a Mahayana Vinaya. All Vinaya originated from one of the 18 schools, which scholars collectively term as Hinayana, but for one of the better terms, it's called the period of Nikaya Buddhism. So we have these two sub-branches. And then also from a branch of the Sthaviravada, another school became very prominent, especially in the Abhidhamma literature. And these schools that flourish in Central Asia use Sanskrit as its language. So from another branch, in fact a sub-branch of the school I mentioned, Sarvastivada, the Vinaya was introduced into Tibet. The route to Tibet, there were two routes. One is from India continent, from the part of India that we are familiar, through some mountain passes in the Himalaya into Tibet, or through Central Asia. So Tibetan Buddhism in the Vinaya and also in the Sarvastivada is strongly influenced by the Sarvastivada school. So this gives you some geographical as well as historical perspective about the spread of Buddhism and how it led to development of three major traditions. So it originated from Central Asia because Central Asia is the end of the Silk Road. From China, the Silk Road, the ancient capital of Chang'an, or what is Xi'an now, through Dunhuang. So there are three land routes. The Indian monks travel to China, and then later on, Chinese pilgrim monks went to India. Many of them through the land routes, but a few of them also took the sea route. The sea route would take them to Southeast Asia first, and then from Southeast Asia, they will go to the Indian continent. So one of the pilgrim monks, I Ching, for example, traveled by the sea route both ways. In fact, he spent some time in Southeast Asia to study Sanskrit before he went to India. So at that time, there was also a very strong influence of Sanskrit civilization in Southeast Asia. In fact, in the whole of Malay Peninsula, the first civilization occurred in what is now called the Bujang Valley. So the Indian traders would travel along the ocean, and then they will see the mountain peak. That is the Kera peak. What is called that? The Gunung Jerai. Gunung Jerai. So when they see the mountain peak, then they will land. They will land in that part of Malay Peninsula. In the modern geography, is near Pantai Merdeka, somewhere there, and the whole Bujang Valley. So you get some idea. So the text that we are going to cover, most of them originated from the Sanskrit text that will extend in Central Asia. So from Central Asia, many of these Sanskrit texts, which were committed in writing on ola leaf or palm leaf, were brought into China by the Indian monks, or later on by the Chinese pilgrim monks who went to India to study, and then they brought back written scriptures in Sanskrit. There was no paper. So the Buddha's teaching essentially for about 300 to 400 years was an oral tradition. The teachings were passed from word of mouth, if you like, from teacher to student, who memorized the teaching and then pass on through the generations. So this is also true for the New Testament in Christianity, the Quran of Islam. They were not committed in writing during the time of the founder of these three respective religions. So some of these texts were committed in writing quite early. In fact, the smaller Sukhavati Pyuhua that is very common in Chinese Buddhism is one of the early texts to be committed in writing in the Indian subcontinent, which includes Central Asia today. So generally we have scenarios like this. The palm leaf texts were brought into China, and then in China they were translated into Chinese. So obviously the monks in Central Asia, they, along the Silk Road, when they go to China, they learn the Chinese, and then they were able to translate the Sanskrit text into Chinese. And the other way around is also true. The pilgrim monks that went from China to study Sanskrit brought back the text and then translated them into Chinese. Of course, the most famous being Kumarajiva, who was from Central Asia. So he belonged to the earlier. He translated a lot of texts during the early time. So sometimes his translation is called early translation. And then there's another famous pilgrim monk, Xuanzhuang, who went to India during the Tang Dynasty. And then he also translated many texts. In fact, the Sutra, the text that I mentioned to you, which is the most important among the three major texts, one of them was translated by Kumarajiva, another one by Xuanzhuang. When we come to this particular text, we will introduce some parts, that they were similar, and some parts that they might slightly differ. Okay, so today we are going to start to introduce a text which is called Visualization Sutra. The name of this text is Amitayus Dhyana Sutra. Literally can be translated as the Meditation Sutra on the Amitayus, the Buddha Amitayus. In Chinese, is 佛说观无量寿佛经, or sometimes just described as 16观经 or even 观经. as the Visualization Sutra. So Quan in this title means the visualization, because the text is about visualization of Amitayus, Buddha. This Buddha that became prominent in the Chinese Pureland tradition has two names in Sanskrit. The one that you are more familiar is Amitabha. So Amita means limitless. Amitabha means limitless or boundless light. And there is another name of this Buddha is Amitayus. Amitayus, the meaning of Amitayus is a boundless lifespan or boundless life. So this is the name, Amitayus is the name of this particular text or sutra. So this sutra, this text has a very dramatic story. This is a story related to very close supporters of the Buddha, King Bimbisara and his queen. So the king and the queen had a son when they were quite old. They were hoping to have a son, but for a long time they didn't get a son. But eventually a son was born to the family, and so Prince Ajatasattu. There was some very not very good relationship between the prince and the father. So the Buddha also had one cousin. You know the Buddha's cousin, Devadatta. Devadatta always opposed the Buddha. Devadatta wanted the leadership of the Sangha, of the monastic community, but the Buddha would never let him lead the Sangha. So Devadatta then tried to influence Prince Ajatasattu by telling him that when he was small, the king wanted to kill him by dropping him on the floor, and then he had a broken finger. So the prince believed in Devadatta and tried to murder his father so that he would become the new king. So he put King Bimbisara to prison in order to ascend to the throne. The king had many in ancient time, like in ancient China, in India also. A king has many wives, but the main consort, the main queen, her name is Vaidehi. So Vaidehi was very attached to King Bimbisara. He visited the king with honey and ghee mixed with corn flour on her body, and grape juice in the garlands she wore. Why did she do that? Because the prince had an idea of letting the father die in hunger in the prison. So the king wasn't provided with any food. But this queen had this idea that she would do this, and in that way brought the food to the king who was in prison. And then after taking the corn flour and the grape juice, the king survived, and then he appealed to Mahamudgalana and Puna to go and teach the Dharma to him. In fact, the king is distantly related to Moggallana himself. So Moggallana and Puna, through their psychic power, could visit the king in prison. So in that way, the king has no problem. The king survived because he had material food, he had spiritual food provided by these two prominent disciples of the Buddha. So then Ajatasattu, after putting the king in prison for about 3 weeks, then asked the prison guard what happened to the father, whether the father was still alive. And the prison guard then told the king what happened, the new king or Prince Ajatasattu, that the queen was doing that. So Ajatasattu was very furious, and then he drew his sword. He wanted to kill the mother. But in Indian tradition, there are 5 types of crimes or sins which were considered very severe. The first is the killing of one's mother and father. And in fact, killing of one's mother comes before the father. So the king has 2 very close ministers who, when they saw that he was going to kill his own mother, stopped him and said that in India there were cases of princes that killed their own father in order to ascend to power, but never in the history of India was there a king who killed the own mother. And if he was to do that, then he was a pariah. They wouldn't want to have anything with him. So these are 2 chief ministers, the important ministers who were close to him at the court. So Ajatasattu then changed his mind and decided to put his mother in prison, but not the type of prison that the father was put in. It was just confined to a palace. So she lost her freedom and could no longer continue to bring food to King Bimbisara. So in brief, the queen lamented on her fate and then prayed to the Buddha for help. So at that time, the Buddha was teaching at the Vulture's Peak. King Bimbisara's kingdom is just not far from the Vulture's Peak. So the queen prayed to the Buddha, and the Buddha sent Moggallana and Ananda, and then he followed them. So the Buddha himself then appeared in front of the queen. So the queen was very surprised originally. She only, like the king, wanted the Buddha's disciple to visit her. Then after having paid due respect to the Buddha, the queen asked as follows, World-honored one, means the Bhagawan. This is referring to the Buddha. What former sin of mine has produced such a wicked son? And again, the exalted one, from what cause and circumstances have you such an affinity by blood and religion with Devadatta? So Devadatta by blood is a cousin of the Buddha. And also later on, when the Buddha returned to the palace, many of his cousins, many princes, joined the monastic order and became monks in the monastic order. So Devadatta was one of them who later conspired. In fact, he tried to kill the Buddha in order to take the leadership of the Sangha, but he wasn't successful. So here in this part of the Sutra text, we see this dramatic story. This is the queen, Vaidehi, experiencing intense suffering. So she was a queen before. She was enjoying all the convenience, the advantage of being a queen. But now put into confinement and quite helpless because she knew that the husband was to die of hunger, but she was quite helpless. So she went through an intense suffering. Then when the Buddha appeared in front of her, she made a request to the Buddha. She said, may the Buddha preach to me in detail of all the places where there is no sorrow or trouble, where I ought to go to be born anew. I am not satisfied with this world of depravities, with Jambu Vipa. Jambu Vipa is the term for India. The term for India. The Buddhist Cosmology talks about Mount Sumeru. So scholars say that when they refer to Mount Sumeru, it's referring to the Himalaya mountain ranges. And to the south is Jambuvipa, India itself. So the queen said that this world is full of hells, hungry spirits, and the brute creatures. Brute creatures refer to beings in the animal kingdom. So there are many assemblies of the wicked. These three collectively are known as the three lower realms. So she continued, may I not hear the voice of the wicked in the future, and may I not see any wicked person. Now I throw my limbs down to the ground before you and seek for your mercy by confessing my sins. I pray for this only, and that the Son like Buddha may instruct me how to meditate on the world wherein all actions are pure. So free of sufferings, such as in this world of ours. So here we see Vaidehi is developing a renunciation to renounce this world which is full of sufferings. So this is in the Buddhist context is called renunciation. So renunciation does not refer to donning the robe. Donning the robe is renunciation, but you must understand the act of donning the robe is an aspiration to get out of samsara, to get out of the cycle of birth and rebirth in the six realms of samsara. We mentioned the three lower realms just now. There are also three higher realms of animal, of the heavenly realm, and also another is called the asura realms. The beings who has the merit of gods but has a strong jealousy. So this is Vaidehi's renunciation. So renunciation is a very important aspiration to, when we make that aspiration of renunciation, we want to get out of suffering altogether. You want to get out of samsara. So the Buddha then flashed forth a golden ray from between his eyebrows, and the ray extended to all the innumerable worlds of the 10 quarters for Vaidehi to see. And the idea is the Buddha, in the Buddhist cosmology, especially as taught in the Mahayana tradition, there's the concept of a different world system presided by different Buddhas. So described as the 6 directions or the 10 directions. The 6 directions refer to north, south, east, west, and then the zenith and nadir. So sometimes we call these the 6 directions, but if you add the 4 intermediate directions of northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, then you have the 10 directions. So the Buddhist concept of space is that space has no center. It's just described as a boundless, as a spreading in the 10 directions or the 10 quarters. So with this, the queen, Vaidehi, was able to see the different Buddha lands. From this Buddha land, she was to choose one because she wanted to leave this Jambuvipa, or this world of ours is also called the Saha world, Sopo Sije. So after seeing all these Buddha lands portrayed in front of her through the Buddha's power, the queen then addressed the Buddha, who honored one. I wish myself to be born in the realm of Buddha Amitayus, in the world of highest happiness, Sukhavati. So this Buddha land of Amitayus Buddha is called Sukhavati. Sukhavati is a Sanskrit term. Sukha means bliss or happiness. So Sukhavati is the realm or the land of happiness. So she then asked the Buddha to teach her how to concentrate her thoughts so as to obtain a right vision of that Buddha land. So this was the request of Queen Vaidehi. So with that, the Buddha, this is Sakyamuni Buddha, went on to describe about Amitabha Buddha or Amitayus Buddha and how one could obtain rebirth in his Buddha land called Sukhavati. So subsequently, this type of Buddha land became known as Pureland. So there are two types of Buddha land. One is called defiled land. In Chinese, Huitu. The other is called Pureland, Jingtu. So Jingtu does not refer only to the Pure Land of Amitabha Buddha. In various other sutras, there are also Pure Lands of other Buddha. For example, Aksobhya Buddha. For example, the Pure Land of Medicine Buddha by Satyaguru. So this world of ours, the Saha world, belong to the category of what is called defiled land. So that's why we have this term. That's how this term Pure Land came in. But please understand that Pure Land is not synonymous with Sukhavati. Sukhavati is one of the Pure Lands, one of the pure Buddha land, if you like. After that, the Buddha gently smiled upon the queen and then emitted rays of 5 colors from his mouth, each ray shining as far as the head of Bimbisara. So although the Buddha was with the queen at that time explaining to her about the different Buddha lands, he had not forgotten King Bimbisara. King Bimbisara had been one of the Buddha's main supporter. The Buddha actually, after he left home, was wandering around, practicing for 6 years, and he came to the kingdom of King Bimbisara. So King Bimbisara had heard of a prince in another smaller kingdom in the north who had renounced to become a mendicant monk, to become a samana. And so when he saw the Buddha, he was very pleased, and he offered to give his kingdom, half his kingdom to the Buddha. The Buddha, of course, refused. And then he even offered to give the whole kingdom to him, but again the Buddha refused. And then King Bimbisara then requested that if the Buddha would gain enlightenment, that he would come back and teach him. So that the Buddha did after he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, what is called Bodh Gaya now, went to King Bimbisara. In fact, the kingdom is not far from Bodh Gaya. So the Buddha had not forgotten this old friend and supporter. So then, at that moment, the mental vision of the king was perfectly clear, though he was shut up in lonely retirement and confinement. And he could see the Buddha from afar. And he paid homage with his head and face, and he naturally increased and advanced in wisdom, where he attained the fruition of an anagamin, the third of the four grades to nirvana. So the Buddha had not forgotten this old friend, and then through his power led him to attainment of anagamin. So we must understand that King Bimbisara had planted a lot of merits himself by supporting the Buddha, and not only that, when he also followed the Buddha's teaching. So when he was in confinement, he requested the Buddha's disciple to transmit the 8 precepts to him. And then he observed them faithfully and practiced faithfully, because after having passed through the same type of calamities, so he was strongly into spiritual practice. And finally, through the Buddha's final help, he was able to attain the third stage of sainthood, called anagamin. So this is the first part of the sutra text. And then we have the next two parts of the sutra text. No, actually the last part of the sutra text is before going on to talk on the 16 visualization or 16 contemplations. The Buddha first mentioned the 3 meritorious acts, or groups of meritorious acts, to the queen. That concluded the first part of the text, and then he went on to talk about the 16 visualization. So actually, the 16 visualizations can be further divided into the first 13 visualizations, which are visualizations proper, from visualization of the setting sun, visualization of the land, visualization of the Buddha, visualization of the Bodhisattva, the 2 Bodhisattvas next to this Amitayus Buddha, that is Avalokitesvara or Kuan Yin, and Mahaprapta, Dashizi Pusa. So there's the visualization of each of these Buddha, and then collective visualization. So altogether 13 of them. And then this forms the second part of the text. And then there is another quite long part of the text, the third part of the text, talk about 3 contemplations, 3 visualization. Actually, not so much visualization. Is a more description of the 3 grades of rebirth. If one were to be reborn in the land of Amitayus Buddha or Amitabha Buddha, there are the lower grades, the middle grades, and the higher grades. So each grades being further subdivided into 3 subgrades. So you have altogether 3 times 3, altogether 9 grades. So these 9 grades form the last 3 contemplation or visualization. So sometimes this text is called, in Chinese is also called the text of 16 visualization, 16观境. So okay, this is an introduction to this text. I want to do this in a modern context by not going into the text, but by talking about the essence. So in the teaching itself, there is this dramatic story that brings up the suffering of King Bimbisara and his queen Waidehi, and that they both developed renunciation out of revulsion of the experiences they went through, because they went from the position of a king and a queen to being put into prison by the own son. So went through this extreme suffering. So this is the how we have this 16 visualization taught by the Buddha. Okay, so this is our teaching for today, the first part. So I suggest now we break into small group. For our small group discussion, I'd like you to use these 3 guidelines for discussion. The first is, what have you learned from the story of Queen Waidehi? This is the story as related in this sutra. And secondly, when was the last time you were serious about sufferings in life? And thirdly, how did you face the sufferings that you face in this life? Okay, how do you face them? Okay,
my group. First question is, what have you learned from the story of Queen Waidehi? Okay, my fellow discussions mates says that what we've learned is that life is full of suffering, many sufferings, and life is impermanent. Okay, I mean this is what we have. So from my viewpoint is that from this story, I have 3 different viewpoints. One viewpoint is from the viewpoint of Ajatasattu, the son. The viewpoint, he's suffering very badly because if he doesn't suffer, he wouldn't want to kill the father. Of course, he's instigated by Devadatta. So he's actually undergoing a suffering, but most people don't see that he's suffering, okay? So the mother is suffering because the mother sees that unable to help the father, and then he's got such a son, you see, and then he feels that what has she done to have give birth to such a son, you see? And the father also is also suffering because, of course, he loved the son very much, and how come, the son wants to kill him, you see? So these are all the sufferings which you can see. So life is full of suffering, and then no matter what role you are, whether you are father, son, or mother, these are all the things we have to go through. So I guess from this story is that we have to learn to know that probably in this case there is such thing as karma, where we do not know why we are having this problem. Probably it's from previously we did something wrong, you see. So we make sure that we do all the good things. So I mean, this is what is how to overcome suffering in that manner. So for the second question, what was the last time you have serious about sufferings in life? So I mean, each of us, usually we go through this when we have some loved one who pass away, you see. So usually at that point in time, we become very serious about it and wondering, what about death and this and that and life? And then, I mean, in that sense, that we will go through the process of anxiety and depression and these all sort of things. So usually, I mean, this is until the point that maybe my fellow colleagues, until the point that we might even seriously think of to renunciate, you see. When we face a problem, we might even consider a part of it. But whether we want to renunciate or not, that's why they bring it up. I will say that when you want to say, you're asking that question, you're not ready. Because when you're ready, you will know one. To me, I will say that. Because when you're ready, the path will be very clear, your mind will be very purified, and the path will open for you, and everything will go right. And then you'll be ready for it. You don't have to ask the question, am I ready? Am I ready? When you ask the question, you're not ready. I can tell you this. Okay. The third question is, how did you face the sufferings in life? Okay. According to our discussion group, we say that this is probably from past karma, and we have to accept this calmly and peacefully, and also that we must also understand the root of suffering, which probably is the law of cause and effect, means from our own actions. So by knowing that it's from our own actions, we cannot blame anybody. We cannot blame this person, blame that person. Sometimes we blame other people. We go to work late, we blame this, blame that. We don't get the right food, we blame this, blame that. So we must take it as part and parcel of our suffering. Karma, is not, and what they call it's a process to go through, so that we don't feel that way, you see. So for me, I study from another tradition of Tibetan, which will say that when you have gone through suffering, means you already purified your past karma, means your negative karma is already, what they call, no more already. So it's going to be what they call a sunshiny day on all the way already, because the rainy day is already past already. So, okay, that's how I see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, one group from here. Any group volunteer? Okay, come. Thank you.
I'm Kelly. Normally I dare not talk, but I think I have to come out here and talk. Okay, the first question. The queen have a lot of suffering because the son would kill the father. I mean, sure, very sad. So the queen wants to stop, maybe, not say stop, I mean, how to handle the suffering. So maybe want to go to Pureland or what. So get the Buddha to give direction. That's the, the answer for the first question. Okay, the second question, my group picked me up here and stand up because I have been suffering for the last 3 years. Whether it's suffering or not, but to me it's really suffering. 2016, I got injury at my neck. Then I didn't know it's an injury because a mob stick hit me and I got a terrible chop from an auntie. So to me, I should be okay. But anyhow, the defect is there. 2016, I cannot get up. I'm so giddy. I feel vomiting. I always feel I'm like a pregnant lady. I lie down, get up, cannot lie down. I wash a plate, I lie down. I fold clothing, I lie down. Then I said, what happened to me? So I went, as usual, when we are not feeling well, we go and see doctor. See a neurologist, dentist, ENT, chiropractor, everything. But at the end, have to go to psychiatric. I said, how come I got no mental problem? Why I have to go there? But I'm very horrible because I feel my right side is like sinking down and nobody can help. So this is my suffering most in my life. So, okay, for the third question, how did I face the suffering in life? So, 2016, I'm lying down just on the floor, my yoga mat all over the level 1, level 2, level 3. Anytime I want to giddy, I lie down. So, how to handle this suffering? Very fast, Amitayus at home, because I cannot get out. So, I listen to very fast talk. I have positive thinking. Then I keep learning. I try my. I didn't really learn Buddhism very deep, but I tried. So this time we have this talk. So I said it's very good. Now I can get up. 2018, I forced myself to get up. Then just go out. I mean, I cannot get out, but I also get up and go inside the car. My cousin, my sister just bring me out. Even I giddy, I vomit or what, just get out. So now it's 2019. I'm very happy. Last week I started my Hokkaido trip. Finally, I go for my traveling. And now I'm very grateful. I mean, I thank you, Tan Xiang organized this talk. So I will come and listen this talk. Maybe will help me better. And now I have a doctor in GH, neurologist. Finally, a doctor said maybe I'm having a neuro problem. I think short form I call MG. Because my muscle, it seems my muscle is weakening. And by 2 weeks' time, I will get my report. I'm not sure yet the report, see how's the report. And I'm taking medication. So I think I will live well with whatever, like, I go to temple more, I do prayer more, do a lot of good deed. Doesn't mean I didn't do good deed. Maybe I still have to do a lot of good deed. Okay, thank you. At least I got a chance to talk.
Okay, so finally, one group here, like to volunteer? Okay, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kelly, by the way. Thank you, Brother Chu. Okay, I'm only kindergarten today. We are trying to take as much as we can, and thank you to all these sisters who shared with us a lot. What have you learned from the story of Queen? What we have learned is she has got the faith in the Buddha, and she's a compassionate queen, and she understands her own cause and effect very clearly. That's why she asked the Buddha for help. We are very short and precise, okay? The second one is, when was the last time you were seriously suffering? Okay, me and my friend there, she went through numerous surgery. Numerous, okay, until today. 11 plus surgery, okay? And she's good and radiant sitting there. For mine is, I'm having, what is nosedive? From the sky, the whole plane. Okay, so what happened to me is that till today, I lost my childhood memory. I can't recollect what happened to me. 5 years old, sorry, I don't know. So when I look at the pictures, I like to recollect. Hey, when was that? I can't. So somebody was telling me, what were you thinking that time? I said, oh my God. When the plane landed safely on the ground, I cannot even move. But I was seeing people coming down, kissing the floor. Okay? I was so lost. I don't know what happened. The pilot didn't even announce anything. Then later on, we get a third news saying the plane was only on one engine. That was really ill, right? Okay, thank you. The third one is how do you face? Now with the understanding of the teachings that I'm talking about me. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I'm trying to grasp as much as I can. I want to listen. I like to read. So when I read, your cultivation, you talk about your cultivation. When you experience, you talk about your experience. But what about Buddha's experience? Where did he come from? How did it come from here to us? The story of Buddha, I want to know, how did he travel? Like today, how I learned from here about the Queen and how the Buddha came. This is what I want. Please feed me something. I'm very hungry. All right? So lastly, and also to practice the 6 parameters. Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the representative from the 3 groups that shared with us their discussion. Okay, so I'd like to share with you an interesting case of a Ukrainian. The name of this Ukrainian is Alek. One day, Alek appeared in IBC. We have a college in Thailand, and then he asked if we could help him to get a long-term visa so he could stay in Thailand. So I asked him whether he was interested in studying. He said no. And I said, well, you come to the wrong place. We cannot help you with a visa if you're not studying. And then I say, oh, by the way, I'll be going out to Penang, and if you like, you can follow me, and then you can go apply, visa. For Ukrainian, I think they get a 1 month, I think the first time 3 months visa, so he could have his visa extended. Then he came. Then he stayed at the temple, and one of our members brought him to apply for the visa. He got the visa extended for another month. And then I asked him what he was doing. He said he was meditating in a forest, a monastery in the northeastern part of Thailand. So he had to extend the visa. So I asked him what he wanted, you know. And then he said, I wanted spiritual result. So I asked him, what do you mean by spiritual result? And he said, oh, I want to attain the first stage. So this was the Ukrainian, at least the first stage of sainthood. We call Sotapan. Then I said, oh, it's very, very good. It's very interesting. So this, then I asked him about how he came across the Buddha's teaching. He said that in Ukraine, they have Tibetan Buddhism. So he attended the teachings of a Tibetan teacher and practiced the four foundation practices. And then while doing that, he developed a very strong sense of revulsion, against the suffering in the three lower realms, and that was the driving force for him. And he said that someone told him that there are good meditation teacher, so he landed in Thailand, but then he had to be contended with a visa problem. So then I wish him all the best and didn't see him for some time. Then about maybe 8 or 9 months later, I received an email from him. He asked whether I was in IBC. I say no, I'm in Penang, but I would be going there the following week. And then I asked him what he wanted. He wanted to see if he can meet me. Then when I asked him, he said he wanted to take the Bodhisattva vow. Then I asked him, why? I said, oh, it's not easy to communicate in email. I said, in any case, I'm coming to IBC. So then he came and see me. And so I asked him why he wanted to take the Bodhisattva vow. Then he told me that he hesitated for a while. He said, I don't know whether I can tell you. I said, okay, you tell me. He said, because I practiced in the forest meditation center and I had attained the first stage. So he told me that. And then I asked him, I said, when you say you had attained the first stage, is this from yourself that you think you have attained the first stage? Or is it from the teacher? So he said, no, it's from the teacher. The teacher told me that I have attained the first stage. So because the teacher told me I have attained the first stage, so attaining the first stage means, you are guaranteed to get out of samsara. At the most, you will go through seven lives, seven rebirth, if you like, or returning to this world. Then he said, because I have attained the first stage, so there is no driving force for me to continue. So I need the bodhicitta. I need to have a bodhicitta as my driving force. So I want to take the bodhisattva precept. In Tibetan Buddhism, they call it bodhisattva vow. So it's quite interesting. Then I said, well, if it is certified by a teacher, then it's okay. So obviously he is quite a serious practitioner. And then when I asked him, he hesitated. Meaning in Buddhism, we have one precept which is called a great lie. A great lie means proclaiming that you have some spiritual attainment when you have not. So that is considered very, very serious. In the case of monastics, if you do that, the order will expel you from the Bhikkhu Sangha or the Bhikkhuni Sangha. So he hesitated because he was afraid that it would be a great lie. So when I say that if it is from a teacher, then it's more reliable. And his motivation of wanting to go on a step to take the Bodhisattva precept or Bodhisattva vow is the correct one. So in terms of renunciation, in terms of going after that, going a stage further to take the Bodhisattva vow to help develop bodhicitta in the context of practice. We talk about the next lesson we will cover this. So then I agreed to give him the Bodhisattva precept, perform a very simple ceremony for him. So this was a very interesting case of a Ukrainian who went to practice in Thailand. In fact, towards the end, he didn't bother about the visa anymore. He just continued to practice until the meditation teacher in that forest meditation center told him, certified that he attained the first stage of sainthood. So all these spiritual stages are not beyond us. If we put the determination and if we have the proper motivation behind to drive us. So I guess, that also answer the questions we have listed. So for today, are there any questions that you might have on this? Today is quite simple. It's a story, just telling you a story. If not, then we will end the session with the transference of merit. Okay, let's do it together. I vow that this merit will adorn the Buddha's Pureland, repaying the 4 kinds of kindness above, and aiding those below in the wretched realms. May those who see and hear all aspire to perfect enlightenment. And when this retribution body is done, be born together in the land of bliss. Okay. So this verse is a simple dedication of merit done in Chinese Buddhism, especially for practitioners of the Pureland path. Whatever merit we have acquired, we don't seek for rebirth in a better, higher realms. So we transfer the merits, dedicate the merits to adorn the Buddha's Pureland. When we say repaying the 4 kinds of kindness above, this refers to the kindness of our parents. And then the second is what? Teacher, parents and teacher, and then the country, and sentient beings, all sentient beings. And then last but not least, the kindness of the Triple Gem, of the Buddha in particular, for giving us the teaching. So this in Chinese is called 四重恩. Then aiding those below in the wretched realms. This refers to the 3 lower realms. So may those who see and hear all aspire to perfect enlightenment. By perfect enlightenment, we mean the enlightenment of Buddha. So when this retribution body is done, be born together in the land of bliss. Land of the bliss is a translation for Sukhavati, the land of the Buddha land of Amitabha or Amitayus Buddha. Okay, that's it for today. So we will have our next session tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow.